Please welcome Karima with her speech entitled tonight, Growing Up in Morocco. Growing Up in Morocco. Please welcome Karima.
I was born and raised in Morocco, Casablanca to be precise. See, thanks to Humphrey Bogart, my hometown is more famous than my home country. That is one of my favorite films of all time for so many reasons. I moved to Minnesota when I was 18 for my undergraduate studies, and I never realized how hard it was to locate Morocco on the map until I moved 5,000 miles away, and I heard it all. Morocco, is that one of the islands in Hawaii? Oh, Morocco, South America, so the toilet flushes the other way. Or Morocco, how's Princess Grace doing? She's dead, and that's Monaco. I wish we had as much money as they did, but we don't. And most foreigners, and sometimes Europeans, are very eager to point to the fact that Americans are very sheltered, they don't know geography. I was no different. I was pretty sheltered growing up. And I will never forget, third grade, one of my favorite teachers of all time, Madame Audrey. And we're sitting in French class, and she says, "Do you know in which continent Morocco is?" I was convinced, sitting there in the third row in the middle of the room, raised my hand. Obviously, Morocco is in Europe. I mean, I live very well, I go to a French school, I speak French, we're in Europe. And this handsome boy who sits in front of me raises his hand and he says, "We're in Africa." I kept my hand raised because I knew he was wrong. I was convinced that he was wrong. And we also had this healthy rivalry. Him and I were always competing for top of the class. And I was thinking to myself, it's just a matter of time before she calls on me and I'm gonna say we're in Europe and I'm gonna be right. And he's going to be wrong again. I wasn't that day. She said, "That's correct. We are in Africa." She was one of my favorite teachers for so many reasons. She was the daughter of an ambassador, had lived all around the world, spoke so many languages, made a really good impression on me, one of the most fascinating people in my life. I mean, she rode to school with the princesses of Morocco. She rode in the car with the king of Morocco to go to school. She was absolutely amazing, treated us like adults, and we learned so much. But that day, I was convinced that she wasn't telling the truth. So I go home at lunch and I ask my dad. I mean, after all, my father knows more than anyone else in the world. Say, "Dad, what continent are we in? Are we really in Africa?" And he answers, "That's right, very good, we are in Africa." My world just crumbled before my eyes. I couldn't believe it. So I brushed it off, we're in Africa. From that day moving forward, we were in Africa. And that's just one of the examples of how sheltered I was growing up. When I came here, a lot of people would ask me, what is it like growing up in Morocco? And it's such a difficult question. I mean, if I were to ask you, what is it like growing up in America? What would you say? I mean, it's very personal. I had a normal childhood, happy childhood. It was normal. But after living here for 12 years, I came up with some of the big main differences. The first one is the structure of the day. Here, people wake up at 6 or 7, they're in school by 7, they're out by 2, and then for the rest of the day, they're doing their fun activities. Or in case of corporate world, if you're working, you're going to work from 8 to 5. In Morocco, that wasn't the case. It was 8 to 12, everybody went home at lunch, and then came back at 2, and the day went on until 6. Lunch was the biggest time of the day where everybody gathered around the table. It was a nice little reset of the day. You know, if you had a bad morning, you could reset, have a little siesta, have some green mint tea, and then go back to work in the afternoon, and everything was fine. So I would say that's the number one main difference. Also, growing up, everything was heavily around academics. We didn't have that much time for extracurricular activities. After all, I was in school from 8 to 12 and then 2 to 6, and doing homework at night sometimes, not always. And that was the lay of the land. So that was the first main difference. The second difference, Couscous Friday. Every Friday at lunch, the world stops. The entire country is having the exact same thing. a couscous big dish with 7 veggies and sometimes some meat, and everybody gathers, and if you can't make it, then you're going to your aunt or uncle for lunch. And everyone else made extra plates to take to the mosque, or people who couldn't afford to make food, or people who didn't have time to make food for themselves. And it was also another excuse for us to go back to school or go back to work a little late, catch up on our Mexican soap operas, and then move on with our life. So that was another one of the main differences. Another thing was everything was in French and Arabic. Most of the documents were in both official languages, Arabic and French. And so if you knew how to speak and read and write, you knew both languages. And it was so annoying growing up because every time I was in French school, the words would come in Arabic. And every time I was in an Arabic class, the words would come in French, and it was very annoying. I hated that growing up. But you learn to live with it. So that was another one of the main differences. The third main difference that I can think of is our summers. I read books about all these American children and teenagers who started working when they were 14 and just doing odd jobs, making extra money to be able to afford whatever they could. I wasn't so lucky. I mean, most adults can't find work, so let alone teenagers being able to make some money on the side. But I used that time to, one, go to the beach with my friends, and two, learn other languages, including Spanish and whatever I wanted. So that was one of the other main differences. And it's funny because when I first started hearing this question, what is it like growing up in Morocco, I kept thinking to myself, it's normal. And the more I thought about it, we're all very different, but also similar on so many ways. So that's what it was like growing up in Morocco.